All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here today. We still have a few people trickling in. Yeah, if you could, one last time, if you could use the link to sign in that Vivi posted in the chat, please feel free to do so and then introduce yourself in the chat box. But yeah, we're so excited to have you here. Happy Friday. Happy almost weekend. Yeah, I will go ahead and introduce myself. So I'm Sarah Chalice. I'm one of the co-hosts with Erin on the Connect OC Partners for Wellness team. Yeah, we're just really excited for this special presentation. But before we get started, I'm going to pass it to my team to introduce themselves really quick, and then we'll get started with our presentation. So I'll start with Vivi.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Vivi. I am one of the outreach coordinators for Connect OC Partners for Wellness. What I mostly focus on is media and all that engagement. So any newsletters you see and social media posts, that's me. Send it over to Erin.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Erin O'Flaherty. I'm the Community Engagement Manager for Partners for Wellness / Connect OC, and I also oversee our Cultural Arts and Mental Health Outreach program. And yeah, excited to see everyone today.
Thank you. Awesome. So yeah, I'll go ahead and pass it to Chrissy and Celia from Strong Family, Strong Children for yeah, the special presentation we're gonna have today.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Chrissy. I'm an AMFT. I work at Strong Family, Strong Children. We provide clinical services, peer resources, and full family care for veteran families. And I'm happy to be with you guys this morning. I'll let Celia introduce.
I'm Celia, also at Strong Family, Strong Children, and I'm so happy to see so many of our own team members here today. So thanks for joining us, you guys. And I wanted just to say, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat as they come up, and we'll do our best to get to them. And then at the end, we'll open up some time to discuss what we're learning today. And yeah, happy to be here.
Okay, so we'll get started. So our training is best practices in treatment for court-involved families. And I think that it's recognizable that most families have gone through some sort of divorce. This is going to be focused basically on the family court system and the effects that it has on the family system. So the objective today is to understand how the court involvement impacts the mental health of the parenting dynamics, which trickles down into the children. And we review the distinct populations and strengthen cross-system collaboration. And that's what we're all here for, right? Is like figuring out how this means and how it works into our fields. So exposure to child-centered community-based strategies and communications. We talk about conflict resolutions, and we talk about resources for stability for these families. So how the legal oversight affects relationships and dynamics. And I'd like you guys just to take a look at these pictures. They're pretty ominous. I don't know how many people here have been in family court personally or otherwise. It's a very ominous presence that you sit in watching the people that are going before you sit before the judge. You feel all the tension, all the anxiety in the room. And knowing full well that the person that is involved in this is bringing their whole entire background in, maybe their own traumatic events, their own experiences, fears, anxiety. And so these things that happen with court systems is the courts can limit the flexibility and trust within the family system. Legal conflict may worsen with unresolved issues. So if people are coming in with unresolved personal issues with their significant other, soon to be ex, these just exacerbate the whole issue. Past trauma impacts co-parenting dynamics in a huge way. So whatever these people are coming in with, we have to know that they're coming in with a lot of excess. So common challenges faced by court-involved families are bridging the communication gaps. Ineffective communication is the lack of trust, the differing interpretations of court orders, all of the things that are happening within the court system creates a lot of hostility within these families. So There are so many self-help options that are available for the people that are going into the court systems, but it's really hard to navigate. And this leads to exhaustion and reactive decision making. So, despite all of these challenges, co-parents can build a stability by focusing on the child and building agreements and utilizing these resources. And this is what we teach our families: is how to navigate the system a little bit easier and how to utilize the resources that are available. So, the other the impacts of the court system. I'm sorry, my slides are so funky. I don't know. Okay, so the trust and communication barriers. So there's adversarial nature in these court proceedings. People are coming in because they're splitting up, and then they go into these court systems and they are being validated or and invalidated by a judge. And a judge sitting before you talking about your personal life and judging whether or not you get more custody or not is high, creates a high reactivity. So most people are coming in with fear of misinterpretation. They're coming in with what one of the family court judges talks about. Her name's Judge Kraber. She says, I can't please everybody here, and everybody leaves unhappy. And most everybody just wants just a bit of validation, and that's impossible for these judges to give. So what we see often is this idea that there's parental gatekeeping. We hear the word alienation consistently across the board. And what's happening there is this, this idea that there is one parent being more protective or they're being alienating. And that's deciphering what's going on to build collaboration between this family system. But basically what happens in this parental gatekeeping alienation spectrum is the children are getting caught in the middle. There's loyalty binds, there's a lot of issues that these kids are dealing with. And this is mostly our purview today. This is how this affects the children, all of this legal impacts that the family system's going through. So the impacts of the court system is disillusionment, it's oppression. You feel deeply oppressed by your experiences within the legal system. There is no winner in this except for the lawyers, right? The judges make what they make. This and there are absolutely no winners when you're walking out of a court case. So if you feel like you've been repeatedly frustrated in attempts to obtain fair treatment, nobody leaves here feeling like they've had a fair shake. So there's a loss of a disruptive system. We go in here thinking that this legal system's here to protect us, and most of the time, it feels as though the judgments are made based on who has the better lawyer, who has the better access to um, information, right? So there's multiple layers of victimization. You feel victimized not only by the perpetrator, most of the time, we'll get to a lot of DV later, but also by the legal professionals, the lawyers, the judges, the bailiffs, the court personnel. We've had experiences where minors counsel that's appointed for the kids has been so toxic for the family system, and you cannot remove minors counsel, right? I think that when the children are not feeling heard or seen by their own minors counsel, and they're just part of a bigger cog of this of the industrial complex, they too are being victimized by this legal system, and it's building systemic distrust in the systems that we have that are supposed to be supportive. So the divorce industrial complex, this is a there's so much profit that goes on in these court systems. And the people that are benefiting from it are typically not the family members, right? A lot of the times we're trying to catch, abuse, trying to catch DV. But what really happens to people is they experience financial depletion, and compounded trauma. We do not have a DSM diagnosis for legal trauma, right? We have medical trauma. We don't have legal trauma. But there are Z codes. But this is something that we like to focus on. So basically with the populations that we work with, there's a lack of legal representation in the court-involved families, and this is because of money. If you look at the chart, people do start at first trying to have legal representation, but it's so costly. And so around 70% of family law cases in California include at least one self-represented party. Typically what that looks like is the breadwinner, right? And it's more, male dominated to be able to be the breadwinner. And there's so much financial abuse that goes on with these cases that then, the person that has the money, typically the perpetrator has more representation, right? So barrier to representation is also, there's like that justice gap where 92% of the legal system problems go unmet due to the lack of the resources. There's not that many resources. There's Public Law Center, and there's some stuff that we have for the veterans programs, but there's not a lot of resources for people of low income for family court. And so this is where you see either adverse orders, dangerous outcomes because of lack of representation, or there's like settlement pressure. I'm just going to go with it. I can't win. I'm just going to let this slide.
Okay, so now we're going to shift out of the legal for a second and look at the oversight that's happening in a lot of the cases that we see. So when we are looking at domestic violence, for example, we are looking at a hopefully a collaborative system. But what ends up happening is that we become first responders, obviously, because we have the most interaction with the clients, the teens, and the families that we work with. And that can mean we're the place to process those experiences that are happening in the legal system, through the divorce process, in these different systems that are affecting the family and the children that we work with. So, for example, we have dealt with families who experience extreme stress due to the lack of coordination between systems. So navigating courts, therapy, school, sometimes law enforcement, all at once. Each system sees a different piece of the story. So how are we as clinicians, meant to focus on safety, emotional regulation, and the developmental needs of the child and the family without collaboration? This is something we see time and time again as a barrier to care. Okay, next slide. Okay, so now that we've prefaced kind of those complications, I want to talk about competency in identifying domestic violence and interpersonal violence, which is tricky, right? Domestic violence is not a legal term, it's clinical. And so it requires our judgment, it requires our expertise, it requires our assessment. And I want to make a distinction that in high conflict families, not all intense arguments meet the criteria for DV, right? So how can we help our clients differentiate? And also, how can we understand as clinicians where that really fine line is sometimes? It is very hard to prove emotional abuse in a court setting, for example. Yet we see it time and time again in our offices, and we see that teens especially are often aware of those dynamics. They recognize those patterns, and they might not be able to fully articulate what they're experiencing or what they're noticing. And it's kind of up to us to help them language this through psychoeducation. What are healthy ways of engaging in conflict versus crossing over into that power and control or that emotional coercive behavior. So it starts with recognition, and that often falls to us. So that's both fortunate and unfortunate, really. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So this is one of the interventions. I'm sure we've all seen this wheel. I think this is a really powerful way to start the conversation when we do, in fact, see that there are signs of power and control. This intervention can be difficult at first because a lot of times, especially with children, these behaviors have been normalized. This is the water they swim in. This is all they have ever known in a lot of cases. A lot of emotional or physical or IPV, domestic violence, hinges on that those bonds, right? Those loyalty bonds. And over time, it can really erode that personal sense of intuition, even really being able to identify that these behaviors are beyond not healthy, but extremely damaging. So a case example would be a 14-year-old, for example, reports that during her exchanges with parents, one parent often or regularly even humiliates the other parent during a handoff. Like this is so common, so common. And over time, the teen begins avoiding contact with both parents because now who do we trust? We're in that loyalty bind. If we move away from the perpetrating parent, what does that mean for our own emotional safety? And if we fully align also with the parent that's being perpetrated upon, again, that poses a lot of different kind of implicit threats. So we're looking for both explicit and implicit threats through identification. Okay, I think we can move on. So let's talk about the short-term impacts of DV on children. I mean, it's pretty obvious what we see. A lot of anxiety, and this can show up in somatic issues, right? Tummy aches, things like that, going to school or not wanting to go to school, I should say, and some regressive behaviors. Post-traumatic stress disorder, right? How does that show up in children and teens? And how do we identify the differences between that demographic and the adult demographic? It's often in those somatic presentations. So we have physical challenges, like I said, aggressive behavior as well. Like it's so common for the child to be pathologized when there is systemic or family issues happening. And I think it's really important for us to obviously have that awareness, but also be able to reflect that back on the family system so that we can align with what's happening at school, do our, properly fill out ROIs to be able to be in contact with those other systems that we mentioned, in order to provide really that continuity of care in these situations. Okay, so now that we've discussed short term, let's go into long term. Okay, so longer term, this is where early impacts become really entrenched and very insidious. This is what we see as that complex trauma presentation that comes in. And this is typically, you know, let's say late teens, early 20s into college, we're seeing presentations of depression or low self-worth without a real clear understanding or insight into what that individual is really experiencing, having difficulty identifying emotions, right? Because if you grew up in a family system where that was murky at best and never really modeled in a way that was healthy, then that's going to be challenging. So this puts clients at great risk for their own, repeating abusive patterns. This is something we often see, and unfortunately, the statistics bear out on that. And also just really understanding that the kind of tentacles of this extend long past childhood. So I think that that's difficult to see, and difficult to untangle at a certain point. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this model, I'm sure we're mostly familiar with, and this can be used for so many different ways to illustrate the idea that what we see on the surface is generally not the full picture, right? It's very, very clear that distress happens in court, and we can see those conflictual behaviors. We can see these kind of emotional outbursts that happen. whether it's from the parent, the children, or the whole family system. But what's under that is all of these other factors. And again, our job to identify them and really, really support our families and our individual clients for their own identification process. Like, hey, this is what I'm observing. Let's go a layer deeper, and then a layer deeper still. What kinds of ways can we understand that, the effects of being in court um, go run very deep. So I think, yeah. Okay, so what we are looking at here is recognizing distress in parents and children, which we've already semi-covered, but this is a little bit more kind of an in-depth look at the distress as it relates between co-parents. So that hostile or passive aggressive interaction, using children as messengers, right? Triangulation. This is something we see a lot. Parentification, where children take on way too much responsibility for adult behaviors. Um, this can also be increased when there are a lack of shared decision making across households. That's a really common presentation. Lack of consistency within parenting and discipline, which is very common as well. So children are trying to adjust to multiple expectations. They're trying to go between households and that transition can be very difficult. So let's say it's like a child that is used to mom's house and then goes over to dad's on the weekend. And there's a fair amount of distress in even, adjusting to dad's way of parenting. It doesn't mean it's necessarily right or wrong, right? It just means that in those situations, how can we support families to understand, normalize what's happening for the kids and minimize and ameliorate the kind of, stressful overlapping. But yeah, so if we see it presented in the parents, we are going to see it presented in the kids one way or another. I think that's the best takeaway from here. Okay, next slide. Okay, triggers. Identifying common triggers, emotional responses. This is something we are all trained for, right? Like I said, transitions, that's a trigger. Decision-making disputes, already mentioned, totally a trigger. New relationships is something we haven't mentioned yet, and this falls out of kind of that legal purview again, and it goes more into that the idea that parenting styles are going to be different now, right? We've gone through a divorce. We don't litigate how soon a child should be introduced to someone, to their parents' new partners. That's not something that falls under that parenting plan, so to speak. That would fall under a collaborative model. And in most cases, that's not neatly sorted out. So parents are having their experience of feeling threatened by the new partner, then the child is going to absorb that in one form or another. Perceived unfairness. That is another very tricky trigger for people. Because again, that's based in a lot of, the parent's own past relational or attachment wounding. Even though it doesn't maybe seem like that on the surface, we know that whatever triggers us, if it's like they say, hysterical, it's historical. So I know that's a little bit of like a hyperbolic way of saying it, but it's the truth. If it is so overwhelming to the parent, then it is usually rooted in some deeper, patterning that comes from their own family of origin. Okay, next slide. So how these emotional response, how are we perceiving these emotional responses as clinicians? What are we observing in our clients? And how can we help them to understand what's happening for them under the surface? Stress responses present very, very differently for all of us. And it's really eye-opening to watch clients begin to identify what's happening to them on a nervous system level in real time. When the triggers come up, what am I experiencing? Am I going into that fight mode? Can I normalize that these are common reactions to triggers and stress? We will get to distress tolerance later, but at least initially, we need to be able to become very skilled at identification, emotional responses, what's happening in my body. Um, so yeah, okay, next.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is bridge this legal observation that we've talked about and Celia's clinical understanding and target what goes on in our purview. Especially for those that are adolescent, we're looking for these kinds of presentations for stress, right? But there's so many overlaps with adjustment disorders, mood disorders, anxiety disorders. And really what happens is we're differentiating between these chronic stress responses. If it's an identity threat, who am I now that my family is ruptured? Who do I belong to? My dad and I were always so close, but now my mom has full custody, right? These identity threats that happen within the family systems, the activation of the unresolved attachment trauma. What is the family court system? What is having so much court oversight doing to your already established attachment traumas within your family system, and maybe some of these things that have been left unattended. So shame-based reactions, defensive survival responses. We start seeing kids get lower grades. They're hanging out, maybe doing more high-risk behaviors, things of this nature to get more attention in the family system with all that existing anxiety. So something really important to talk about clinically is when we have a court system, we are bringing people in that have pre-existing conditions, right? Sometimes there are personality disorders. There are statistics that say the higher the conflict and the longer of duration of families and court systems, it's very likely that there's a personality disorder in the mix. Right. So when you see somebody with like a narcissistic personality that's highly antagonistic, we call it high conflict in the court system, highly antagonistic in narcissistic personality disorder looks like vengeance. It's like grandiosity that shows up in the entitlement to get their way in the court systems, right? So I think that those that are borderline going into these situations talk about attachment wounding and abandonment, and all of these symptoms that can be heightened in these situations. So we also look at PTSD and borderline and complex trauma. This Venn diagram is one of my favorites because it really shows that the overlapping of these symptoms, it's really important for us clinically to tease them out to know how to best serve our clients when they're in our spaces. Because again, like I said earlier, and I think trauma, the impacts of the legal system can create also some PTSD symptoms as well. So we do have some interventions that we'll talk about for court-involved families, and that's following assessment, obviously, and what we have, and then seeing what kind of resources are needed or what type of interventions that we'll put in place. So I like this. I did a little screenshot of this danger assessment. I don't know if you guys have seen it. The link is attached here. I can attach it also to the chat later. But this danger assessment link goes through a series of questions, and it's digitalized, and you can ask your client within the session, and it'll give you a scale. And this scale will say what the score is and what type of danger. I think it's really interesting, just like the power and control wheel, to be able to show clients that have normalized a lot of these things going on in their systems, that they are at risk for other things. This also guides us into subsequent interventions. I think another great way to look at this is to give our clients intervention of the psychoeducation piece, right? We're always trying to get our parents into the parallel, right? That majority, and trying to get them with limited communication. They stay on their own sides of the street. They are keeping everything as calm as possible with clear boundaries and having separate responsibilities in order to keep the system as stable as possible and create a new homeostasis while they're going through this type of transition. Basically, co-parenting counseling is a great one. We have a program at Strong Families that we have that, we have the intake process. There's the initial evaluations and challenges. That's where we see where the gaps are. And a lot of the times, this is where we catch where the resources are needed. We'll talk about resources in a little bit, but the resources needed, we hand over to our peer navigators or resource within our community to give people the most access to support during these transitions. In co-parenting, we do a pre and post scale. How did they do in the beginning when they came in, and then post all of the psychoeducation, some of the relational work, and resourcing? How do they do afterwards, right? So I think that it's really good to give co-parents at the very least some sort of self-reflected worksheets. Where do they want to be, right? Where can we adjust some of our needs into where we want to go and what our kids need. Kids are a very good resource to ask reflective questions over. Most of the times when we see kids coming into the family system, they have the right answer. You ask them what they need and what they think their families need and what they would like to see. And it's typically very smart. I think giving kids agency and voice in all of these matters is super important for the process, and enabling them to do so and supporting them within the family system. I make sure to tell parents all the time how intelligent and wise their kids are when they say such and such, right? Really empowering kids in these dynamics. So other strategies for minimizing court interventions. When you have people that are in the court system and they're coming in, how can we minimize some of this strife? Most of the time, people can't talk long enough. They just want to go put another court order in, and they're going to go win. They're going to call their lawyer, they punishment, revenge, right? All of these types of things. So really what there is trying to create a way to see the bigger picture and encourage respectful discourse, and staying in the here and now, right? A lot of the times when you have clients coming in with such high conflict, they said, well, in 2006, he really came through and he did this and this, right? We have to stay in the here and now. What are your needs right now? And building that understanding of what's coming up for you, like Celia was saying, with emotional responses, what's going on with some of the attachment wounding, what's going on within you that's present in the here and now that isn't going to be sustainable. And teaching people to call timeouts, right? That means that if the conflict is escalating, what can you do? Do you need to establish a separate type of communication style, brief, informative, friendly, firm? Giving some real interventions on how to smooth that over. So, and responsibility of self is something that I think that I talk about more and more with a lot of our court affiliated families is, sure, this is what's going on, but what can you control and what is your responsibility? And the biggest piece of this is, what type of parent do you want to be for your kid? They will grow towards the more consistent, secure relationship. And that is all that is controllable here. So how we can maintain responsibility of self and teach how to strengthen the bonds within the family system from the new dynamic of the separated parents and their children. So there's also flowcharts. I know that a lot of people in this room they work with adolescents. We work with the whole entire family system, but what we do is we want to establish clear boundaries and consistency. So there's disagreements that are going to happen. There's conflict resolution flowcharts that we've created in order to give families the brief, informative communication style psychoed, and then giving both parents rules of engagement, where it's like, you have a schedule a phone call, make sure you set a 15-minute timer. If you need to request a 2-minute or a 24-hour break, that's part of it. It doesn't mean that I walked away from this conversation and now see she's doing that thing again where she's ignoring me or he's shutting me out, right? It's structured into an agenda where people have expectations on how to take breaks when they need to. So if parents are at an impasse still, where do they resource from there, right? That's going to happen. Do they go to their therapist? They go to their co-parenting facilitator? They go to their mediator, their lawyers? How does that work? And really make sure to give people all of these options to have communication resolution. I think a lot of the times what we notice is that that wasn't taught in their family systems, and it wasn't in their marriage how to resolve conflicts and peacefully. So trying to give people psychoeducation on that is important. But the next step in this flow chart is you can't get there with the interventions given. It looks like it's going to be a court order, right? That starts getting expensive and the stakes get higher. And then the filing the motion, standing before a judge is like the last step. So we try to tell and teach that that is the most costly and time consuming and antagonistic way to go about this. Let's try and see if we can solve this towards the easier way. So establishing clear boundaries and consistency. I'm sure most of you guys have heard, but just in case, there's so many different ways to communicate with our parents. The best way for people that have high conflict and they cannot resolve is to have these court monitored apps, right? Talking Parents, Our Family Wizard. These apps enforce accountability. And what that means is they know that they're being monitored. Maybe they act a little bit differently in that. So it's important to remind parents that court orders are legally binding. I think that for all purposes, the court order is the rules of engagement, but with the legal professionals, it's so muddled that it's good to have your resources to talk to people about what they all mean and what their rights are. So call to action. So this is something that I like to open up for all of us to talk about, because in our own ways, we can all help each other and support each other in the Orange County area. There are how can we share our resource maps? How can we cross-refer, right? Co-parenting, mental health support. And I think that the most important thing is that we have to start acknowledging and normalizing the emotional toll of the court involvement for families. It is in a very intense situation that that families find themselves in. And it can be so overwhelming that this becomes the crisis of the week every week. How does this rupture in this family system create this ongoing the ongoing symptomology of the family system? So I think that for both things, basically knowing the emotional toll that the court has on families, important to know all of the resources out here. So, there's a self-help center, public law center. If they're veterans, we have a legal access for low-income veterans, and it's no cost for veterans. There's Community Legal Aid Society. And there's also, this is not exhaustive, obviously, but domestic violence and health in Orange County as well. So these are all places that we can start working with, referring to, and understanding, networking with. Here's our flyer. This is what we do, but also I add the Tierney Center and the VA and the Veterans Crisis Hotline. So there's resources out there for everything. You want to take this one, Celia?
Yeah, so again, like Chrissy mentioned, collaboration, especially across agencies and within our community, is so important to know what's out there. Prioritizing the emotional and psychological well-being of the whole family, and then how, we can support a process that is, like we've been talking about, extremely overwhelming and under-resourced, right? Like Chrissy mentioned at the top of the training, really the people who win are the ones that have kind of a financial
Celia, I think your Zoom is freezing.
in we're here to try to get a great process that happens when we are doing exactly what Okay, take it away then. Am I back?
Okay. Yeah, well, yes, you're back, but I'll take it away. But I'll fill in the blanks. I think that therapeutic services, and look, there's four of these on here, but there's so many in Orange County. And I think that in creating a Rolodex of
Here.
all of the networks that we have out here is going to be a fantastic way of being and doing. And this is where I like the end of this session to really talk about what you guys think, how we can collaborate, how we can network in a better way and support the families that are in our care. Um, and with that, that does it. That does it for the
Can you all
presentation.
hear me again?
Yes, you're
Okay,
back.
so sorry about that. That was so unfortunate. But I just wanted to also, highlight the fact that everything that we're talking about really does rely on exactly what we're doing here today, right? Is this
Oh, Celia, it's again.
cross collaboration, prioritize, do our
Okay, your internet went funny again, but I would like to invite any questions that you guys might have about anything that you've seen here today.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm a mental health clinician at Thrive Together OC. We do mostly assessments and screening for clinical high risk for psychosis, so we don't offer like treatment services here. But we do have a lot of families who have or are involved in the court system. What specific services do you offer for families in Orange County?
At Strong Families, we have, I can pull up my flyer again too, so we do clinical services. We have a team of clinicians that does couples therapy. We do co-parenting, individual therapy for all families, all members of the family. And gosh, up to 85 years old, we have our oldest is 85. So there's a dad support group that we have. The courts really like our dad support group. If you need that, if there's a court ordered, perpetrator or parenting class, this suffices for a lot of the judges. They know about our program, and the dads group works with a cohort of dads to talk about attachment. They talk about parenting styles, skills, and they do a lot of work there. So that's what we do here. Oh, the biggest piece of it is we have peer navigators, and the peer navigators know all of the resources that are available for people to use in our area, especially the veterans.
Great, thank you. I'll keep that in mind for my clients in the future.
You're welcome.
Are some of the costs covered by, I have a question about coverage in terms of insurance, and this is this something that's covered by insurance or Cal Optima? Is that part of the
It's a good question. We are grant funded. It's free services for veteran families. So we're grant and donation funded. Or CalVet,
Yes,
by any
okay.
chance, yes, yes. So we're funded by CalVet, yes.
Okay.
And unfortunately, hopefully you guys can hear me. Unfortunately, there are not a lot of agencies doing a co-parenting model, providing this kind of depth of service and level of service, especially with the peer navigation resources. So, hopefully more models like this will become available. But in the meantime, if your clients don't maybe fit the criteria, we can always look for alternative resources that may.
So if they're not veterans or families with veterans, you could help them find.
Not
Oh,
necessarily, but it's worth calling in and going through our intake coordinator just to verify that because again, the involvement in the community is still, worth reaching out clinician to clinician. We'll make our emails available. So if there are ever any questions, I really, welcome you guys to reach out to us directly as well.
Thank you.
Of course. So just a quick question, and if anybody feels comfortable chiming in, I'd love to know how you feel it's applicable to your training, would be applicable to your population, and if you have, anyone on your caseload right now that you think, oh, looks like I glitched out again.
If it would be applicable to your training, and if there's anybody on your caseload right now that's involved in the family courts, I believe that was going. What do you guys notice with the population that you work with? What's coming up for your teenage clients or that are involved in the family court system or with divorced parents? What are you noticing the most?
I think many of my clients have shared just the difficulty in navigating the different like parenting styles, the different expectations, especially when going between like two different homes.
Right. There's no stability or structure, and there's no continuity between the homes. I'm
Mhm.
curious about the court involvement outside of family court with the population that you work with. You said you work with clients with psychosis. And so I'm curious about even court oversight with, criminal or any time, anything else that you might be involved in also.
Yeah, I mean, for now, we're mostly doing like screenings and assessments, so people can be referred to us either by their current mental health provider or we can like come across them in the community, and get them connected. So, um, it's not specific to all of our clients, but I think we do have some families who, and the ones I'm thinking of, a lot of our clients tend to be older. So they've had a lot of these experiences more like earlier in their childhood. But we're still seeing like the impacts of it. And for a lot of these clients, like around the time their parents started the divorce process, or there was a lot of conflict in the home, is when a lot of their symptoms, not necessarily of psychosis, but more general mental health began. And then, those things can kind of progress over time to risk of psychosis for some clients.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I actually volunteer with like a high school ministry. So I experience a lot of like high school girls I walk really closely with, and I have a couple of girls in my group that have really expressed like a lot of grief within like being involved in the family court system, and then also like navigating what co-parenting looks like in like custody. Like she lives with her dad and like really wants to see her mom, but like isn't allowed to. And so like there's a lot of anger and a lot of grief that like she's struggling in whole like figuring out how to understand, and then like grieving like the loss of like a potential like my friends have a mom and I don't get to have a mom, like, and I really struggle with that. And I don't get to go, my mom doesn't get to do my hair for prom, and like just things like that. She's just really struggling with. So I've seen that in a few different students that I've walked with. So yeah, I think I'd say like a lot of grief. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
Hmm.
Okay, I'm going to try this one more time. But what you just said, Sarah, I think is so important, and maybe something that we didn't talk enough about in the training, just in terms of, again, those presentations and how to help our clients walk through that grieving process. Because we are dealing with loss, right? On one level or on multiple levels. And so how that becomes a process that really never completes, right? That we really manage the expectations. And again, this is about self-awareness, and now this is part of your orient and relate to it, right? It's so crucial, and I think it's beautiful work, but it's long term. It's very long term work. So, and then another idea that I just wanted to throw out to the group, hopefully you guys can hear me, is this idea of boundary setting, right? And making boundary setting such a part of the conversation from the get-go, right? What are boundaries? I think that the term is thrown around a lot and really misunderstood, that it's not about controlling others. I'm starting to glitch out again. Give me a thumbs up, Chrissy,
You're
if you
good.
can hear
You're
me.
back. You're back. Okay. I'm going to try and fill in that gap. I, it is,
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So to do with our clients is helping them understand the terminology that's thrown around a lot.
I'm going to fill in something real quick. We work with Judge Craver at Family Courts, and she and our team, we're building a pilot on how to build a better culture within the family court system. Our culture in general, with the high divorce rates and family discord. I mean, you know, there's discord from the top of our country down and left and right. But I think that what the family courts are trying to do is build a better culture, and maybe part of our work as clinicians in this field is to start building a better way of going through divorce, a better way of relating through divorce, taking some of the stigma, some of the conflict, right? Normalizing a lot of the things that people are experiencing and creating a different way of going through this process in a more peaceful and collaborative way. And I think that in each of our work, we could implement that in some way. And that's a big piece that I'd like to bring. I mean, our culture does a lot of things wrong, and, you know, like, you know, death or taking care of the elderly or whatever it is. But in this training, in this space, how can we create a better cushion and emotional support and resources for these families going through this to decrease the impacts of the mental health long term? Celia says, okay, I give up. Her internet is not cooperating today. Hi, Stephanie. How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah, so I mean, if there's no other questions or thoughts, I can give it back to Sarah, maybe.
Yeah, thank you both, Celia and Chrissy, just yeah, for your insight and for your input on yeah, what's going on in the court systems and how we can support with the work that we do, both short-term and long-term care for the whole family. Yeah, I think that's super important as well. So yeah, I guess we'll just move into some partner updates. Oh, we do have one question in chat. Will the slides be shared? So Stephanie, I think oh well we're recording the meeting right now. So at the very least the recording will be up. But I'll leave that up to Chrissy if she wants to send the presentation out to us and then we can send it in the meeting summary in a little bit or in a couple days. So yeah, for sure we can do that. Anyway, so we'll go into some program updates on our end. So yeah, we do have a couple of resource fairs coming up, specifically at Santa Ana College and Cal State Fullerton. So yeah, we do have a couple openings left at Santa Ana College. If you are interested in joining, please feel free to email me. Yeah, we're trying to get up to 60 vendors on campus. So it's gonna be crazy. It's gonna be so fun though. And it's Renaissance themed, so it's gonna be so cool. Yeah, and so I can also pass it to Erin if she has any updates on her end as well.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. So yes, currently I'm still sharing the cultural arts and mental health outreach program, which takes form in workshops, and we come to the partner organizations. And thank you for the great discussion today. We do offer as a way of child and parent bonding. We do workshops that children can take part in with their parents. And so if that's something that anybody's interested in, please reach out to me. I put my email in the chat. And yeah, thank you again to our presenters. That was incredibly informative and really gave us a lot to think about. So thank you so much for your time and for all that you do.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin. And we can go ahead and pass it to you all if you have any program updates on your end that you'd like to share. Any flyers you want to include in the chat, you're more than welcome to. But if you want to unmute yourself and talk a little bit about your updates as well, we'd love to hear from you. Any updates? Going once?
All right, I'll jump in. I wasn't sure if anyone else wanted to share first, but hi everyone. My name is Stephanie, program director at the LGBTQ Center OC. Just wanted to share that we have our annual LGBTQ youth conference that's coming up next month. I did drop the flyer in the chat if you'd like to join us, or if you have any clients or community members who may benefit. The focus is LGBTQ young people, but we extend invitations to, parents, families, educators, and just our community partners to also participate. It's a free event. There's going to be a huge community resource fair. I know Erin's going to be there as well, which is really nice. But so far, we have 55 community partners that'll be joining us and providing interactive activities and resource sharing. We'll have workshops, guest speakers. It's a full day. So if you'd like to join us or if you have any questions, feel free to download the flyer. And then I'll also add my email in the chat if you'd like to follow up with me too. So, all right. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. Anyone else have any updates?
We
I
do.
put a, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. I put a flyer in the chat. We have a professional training series. Our next training is March 18th, so next week from 12 to 2. It's a free training about risk for psychosis assessment and the things that you can do. So all are invited, and the information to sign up is in the flyer.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah.
Our agency is putting together a workshop on helping people understand people with developmental disabilities also have anxiety and other mental health conditions, and helping people recognize how that looks differently. I don't have a flyer for that. It's coming up. It's a statewide presentation, and I will share that as soon as I can. But if people want to email me, they can email me. It's on May 7th, and it's a 10 o'clock Zoom. So I'll drop information in my email into the chat.
Great. Thanks so much. Anybody else? All right. Well, we can go ahead and finish early. Yeah, thank you so much to everyone who joined us. And for our speakers, Chrissy and Celia, thank you so much for your input again. And yeah, just providing a lot of information for all of us to yeah, just take to our services as we go forward. So everyone have a great rest of your week and into your weekend. Stay cool, all the things. Thank you so much.